there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. This is a Magic oral history web series that takes a look at over 20 years of the first and best trading card game. And guess what, peeps? This is my 25th episode. Woo! Yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Who's the man? Who's the man? I mean, I've put out other videos, cube stuff, top 10 lists, vlogs, but they don't count. This channel is really all about the sets and looking at Magic's history up close and personal. And we're in the middle of the most important Magic set, Alpha Beta Unlimited. So far, we've looked at the story of how Magic came to be and examined black. And so today, we're looking at blue. Yeah, blue. The best color of Magic, and I say that without qualification. I've always said that in my heart, I identify the most with blue. Then white, then red. Blue is the color that gives crafty players the most chances to outplay their opponents with cunning, and yet, in many ways, blue is the least powerful color. Over time, we've seen that blue is the slowest color, and at the same time, it has so much interactivity. Blue rarely starts off demanding attention due to its raw power, but its slippery creatures and mastery of counter magic and bounce ensures that brawny might can fall to wit and intrigue. That's blue in a nutshell. But the important question is that how blue started off? We know the end product, but the original take was quite different in many critical ways. Of all the colors, blue has the least creatures, with only 14 out of 46 spells. Most of the creatures are fairly powerful for their cost, though. Blue is also the king of instant magic with 14 instants and interrupts, and has quite a few sorceries too. Let's start off with the creatures. The biggest and most efficient is Mahamoti Jin, aka Fat Modi. The original art made him look reluctant to serve as master, but the art that you see in M15 is most badass. While Arabian Nights had a lot more Jinns, Mahamodi was the first. Blue had a gigantic comment in Sea Serpents, the first creature with island home. The idea that you could kill it by blowing up your opponent's islands, thus giving it no place to live, is incredibly flavorful. But Sea Serpent was a weak card because in many matchups, it just couldn't attack. Since then, blue has had many, many serpents at common and uncommon, so here's a few of my favorites. Blue is the color of the sea. Besides serpents, pirates live in the sea and shoot at people. Thus, pirate ship. It has island home, which is annoying, but at least even if it can't attack, it can still contribute to the board state if it can't directly get at the opponent. If you want to play flyers, blue was the place to be with ABU. At uncommon, there was Phantom Monster, which was just like Hill Giant, except it flew. Phantasmal Forces was another illusion, with 4 power instead of 3, but it was incredibly fragile and required a blue mana on its controller's upkeep, and that's a serious drawback. But 4 power in the air for 4 mana, whew, that ends games. Richard Garfield separated the 4 classic elements of the West into 2 colors. Red got earth and fire, and blue got water and air. And so the blue elemental creatures are surprisingly straightforward. There's Air Elemental, which is strictly worse than Sengir Vampire or Sarah Angel in the same set for the same cost, but it's still been well good enough to make the grade since it has flying. Air Elemental has often been first picked in many, many core set drafts. Water Elemental does hit surprisingly hard, and is well above the normal ground pounder level for blue by modern standards, and yeah, it's a solid card. The little blue creatures of the set were merfolk. A vanilla 1/1 for you isn't that special, but Lord of Atlantis gave these guys +1/+1 in the Island Walk. It took several years for Lore of Atlantis to start becoming tournament viable because it needed critical mass of support. But once there were enough merfolk out there, Fish was a real deck. And as is the case with all of Alpha's lords, Lord of Atlantis originally wasn't a member of the tribe it boosted. That has since been fixed. Prodigal Sorcerer has had so many variants over the years. This card got the nickname Tim extremely fast because Monty Python and the Holy Grail have always been held in high regard by gamers. Here's a link in case you don't know what they're talking about. Doing direct damage is no longer in flavor for blue, but it is in flavor for red. I need to talk about Psionic Blast. Psionic Blast does make kind of sense flavor-wise, in the case of D&D psychics frying their own brains while injuring others. But mechanically, this is really red's prominence. The legacy of Psionic Blast is Ravnica's Char, and the modern-day Tim is Prodigal Pyromancer. While their templating left a ton to be desired, Blue did get 2 copy cards. Clone is fairly straightforward, coming into play as a copy of another creature. This copied all of its characteristics. The comely Vezivin Doppelganger could switch its form on your upkeep, but could never get rid of its blues. Blue also got Copy Artifact, which was a very sneaky way of getting around the restricted list of Vintage, so if you have a broken artifact, you get another. Blue benefits from walls more than other colors because it's the slowest color. Wall of Air doesn't hurt anything all that much, but it's got really efficient stats and blocks 5-drops, so for 3 mana, yeah, it's a good investment. Wall of Water didn't get reprinted much because it kinda sucked. Let's move on to Blue's trademark, its signature mechanic, Counterspells. The set had Power Sink and Spell Blast and, just Counterspell. Spell Blast was the worst of the 3, and Power Sink wasn't so bad. You did have an option to kind of beat it if you were the guy being played because you could just tap lots of extra mana. It's not super efficient. Counterspell is just too good for Standard, and has been officially given the boot for Cancel. And this has been the case for years. Now, there's so many variants of Counterspells under the sun, I can't even get into them. Some of my favorites, though, just a very short list. Remand is really cool. I think Cryptic Command is really awesome and is still a player in Modern. And I also think Arcane Denial is a really fascinating card because there's so much card draw involved. There's another counterspell in the set, Blue Elemental Blast, which can destroy a red permanent or counter a red spell. And red got the same feature because, I guess, red gets counterspell access? It feels odd, but that was how Alpha, Beta, Unlimited worked. There were lots of mirrored effects. Some players even ran Thought Lace and Chaos Lace, interrupts that changed colors of spells, and every color had a lace, but they would run the 2 laces plus a full playset of Elemental Blasts so that they could counter every spell. It's not very good in terms of card advantage, just really not that good overall, but people were in love with counterspelling in the early days of Magic. Here's my obligatory comment on the laces. They stink on ice, and while their effect is permanent, the effect that they have is generally speaking not worth a card. Wizards printed them because there was an object lesson. Wizards wanted to teach players that almost every characteristic of a card is malleable, able to be changed one way or another. Magic truly was the shores of imagination, and no color encapsulated that as well as blue. But at the same time, the effects were horrible. Now, Wizards has moved the vast majority of later effects that change cards' colors onto permanents, which also tended to have other uses as well. I can tell you that it felt like a kick in the junk every single time I opened the lace. I was never happy. There were some other really awesome spells. For 3 mana, Mana Short shut down a player's turn by tapping all their lands on their upkeep. What's in the rose? In Magic, pain and frustration is what's in the rose. Drain Power is a card we've never revisited, but it allows you to tap all your opponent's lands as a sorcery and add the mana from it to your pool. While this was extremely risky at the time due to the existence of mana burn, it could fuel some seriously big effects. This was a combo with Rocket Launcher. Oh, and Drain Power did inspire one other famous card, Legends Mana Drain. Possibly the most broken counterspell ever printed. No, maybe. Yeah, I think it's definitely. For a color famous for card drawing, blue only got 2 draw spells. Brain Geyser was a state-of-the-art, even if the art happened to be Stone Age art. 2 mana upfront is slightly cheap by today's standards for drawing X, but this is at sorcery speed. A much, much better choice for drawing cards is Ancestral Recall, blue's contribution to the boon cycle. This is my favorite card in Magic. Now, I own one. Nothing else feels so powerful as when I play Ancestral Recall. Just nothing. Magical Hack and Sleight of Mind were very noteworthy, but definitely not powerful. Sleight of Mind allowed you to change colors in rules texts, either on permanents or on spells, and Magical Hack allowed you to do the same thing with basic land types. While people didn't talk about the stack at the time, they used something called batches. There's going to be a day where I explain the original Magic rules, and then how it shifted in 6th edition, and then later tweaks, but this isn't going to happen today. Do you want to hack your game? Time Walk hacks the game by giving you an extra turn. Now, I hate the spell sequels in group games because players get to hog all the fun. But in the real tournaments, I feel like Time Walk effects are fair game. Time Walk was definitely inappropriately costed. 5 mana seems about right to me. Or 2, provided you tack on a huge rider on it like Final Fortune. Final Fortune is definitely one of my favorite cards and my favorite throwback to Time Walk. Even if I have happened never to play Final Fortune in the tournaments, I just don't want to take that risk. But the fact that this concept exists is incredibly exciting. The other blue piece of power, Time Twister, also deserves to be talked about. This spell was broken open in Alpha's development by Charlie Catino, who coupled it with Wrath of God, Swords to Plowshares, and Counter Magic to slowly strip every single creature threat from the opponent's deck while shuffling everyone's graveyard back into their library. Once all the threats were removed from the opponent's deck, Charlie could just let the game play out and deck his opponent. This was not well received by R&D. Blue also gets some more hacking with Psychic Venom, which made tapping a land very unpleasant. A lot of early players like playing this with Icy Manipulator and even Twiddle. The card disadvantage was preposterous because, well, what happens if your opponent does nothing and just waits to play their spells with pristine mana? Well, Power Sync ruins that plan. Blue could also use Phantasmal Terrain to cut off colors, but today these effects, generally speaking, are not worth it. Blue could hack enchantments to make them painful every turn, but, by the way, I didn't mention it last show, but Feedback as well as Curse Land originally did damage on every upkeep, not just the permanent's controller. But Wizards issued errata to make all these enchantments, including Wanderlust, worked the same way. It wasn't an issue of power level because the power of all these cards was pretty minuscule. It was a templating issue. They wanted all the upkeep ping enchantments to work the same way. Copper Tablet was the only one that got to keep its constant pinging, because symmetry, I guess? On the whole, though, these hacking cards didn't get too many follow-ups. Doing frustrating things on upkeep was a memory issue, and it really didn't make most games very enjoyable. Another hacking card was Power Leak, which ate up opponents' mana or life if they had an enchantment out. This doesn't feel very blue at all. Then there was Creature Bond. The art doesn't communicate the effect of the card. It's hard to tell that there's a dragon behind the woman, and the death trigger in blue doesn't really feel right. This card has been properly shifted to black, where it belongs. Blue also got to steal stuff. Control Magic was the best spot creature removal in the game because the creature came over to your side. Wizards persuaded players to play this at 5 mana, and it was fair at that level. But my favorite version of Control Magic is in black. It's Enslave from Planar Chaos, because even if it costs 2 more, that feeling of loss literally stinging your opponents every turn, ooh, chilling. Treachery is the most powerful version because it lets you untap all your lands, but I prefer Enslave. Control Magic paved the way for many other cards that steal permanents. Red gets to borrow, blue gets to keep. The set also allowed us to directly steal artifacts with, steal artifacts. What a name. Blue is the color that's historically been closest to artifacts, and this card sets that premise up. Another reinforcing example is Animate Artifact, which allowed players to attack with the Jamday Tomb or the Hive. Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas, or March of the Machines, or Karn Silver Golem, or the brand new M15 and Soul artifacts all play with this area of design space. Wizards kept trying to make Jump a card that people would play. They first tried tacking on a slow cantrip, and then a fast cantrip. This is a classic example of a card that never gets costed right for players to run it in tournaments. The problem with Jump is that even with cantrip text, it isn't usually worth paying a single U for it. 2 mana for a permanent version with a blocking restriction still didn't get played in Theros. There was better out there. Amazingly, the only thing that blue could bounce in ABU was creatures, with Unsummon. Blue didn't get the range of bounce we see today with cards like Cyclonic Rift or Hurkyl's Recall until sets like Antiquities and Legends. Invisibility, the first enchantment to give unblockability, got taken out with Revised Edition, and honestly I'm not sure why. The best card that gives unblockability as an enchantment is probably Traveler's Cloak, because it lets you draw a card, but this type of effect is very hard to cost in a way that balances it for limited and constructed play. For color hosers, ABU's blue has Life Tap. This is a relevant effect, but if there's any color that can get mana without having to tap lands for it, it's green? Of the 10 main hosers in ABU, it's the least punishing. Aside from the aforementioned blue Elemental Blast, there's a bizarre red hoser, Volcanic Eruption. This card was very expensive, but allowed blue to destroy red's mountains and provide a consequent earthquake. It even damaged flyers. Volcanic Eruption has to be the least effective color hoser in the set, though. It also looks very unseemly as a blue card. The most divisive card in the set was Stasis. Stasis shut down the pace of the game to a trickle, even more harshly than Winter Orb. There's no untap step. Getting Sarah Angel and this out was the game plan for many blue-white decks, especially once Legends came out with Kismet. Stasis was also incredibly off-putting to many players because of that art. What is a French fool doing on this card? Why is there a palette? Is that a dog? Or an Anubis-type guy? Or what? This card prompts so many questions, and I'm not sure I want to know the answers. Prison decks loved using this card, and Wizards has been extremely careful since about taking away untap steps. The last card to deny players an untap step was Time Spiral's Brine Elemental. So, now that we've gotten the whole picture, let's take a look at what I think are the standout cards of this set. Here's the top 5 cool blue cards. Number 5, Stasis. Scary though it is, this card is one of the most brutally powerful control effects in the game. Number 4, Psionic Blast. This is so red and not blue, but this card is a fascinating tease of what the color pie might have been if blue had been secondary in direct damage. Number 3, Ancestral Recall. It doesn't do anything special, it just lets you do more of everything in the game for dirt cheap. Number 2, Time Walk. Like Ancestral Recall, it lets you do more stuff. but in so many different ways, like attacking. And the number one coolest blue spell of ABU is Counterspell. Screwing with your opponent's plans is always rewarding. This is the reason so many mages learn to love blue. One little word is all it took. No. I still reflexively look at the board and see if the other player has 2 blue untapped when I play against blue decks. ABU's blue was a color of flying, it had cards that gave creatures flying, and it had a bunch of powerful, uncommon, and rare flyers. It had its signature mechanic, Counterspells, and it had cards that manipulated the flow of the game, whether that meant tapping your opponent out, drawing a huge number of cards, making lands painful to tap, or just taking another turn. While other colors have gotten the ability to hack the game as well, blue still has everything it started off with. Now its creatures got smaller, the power of card draw got rebalanced as Wizards recognized that blue had the most broken effects in ABU. And for years and years, blue has been nerfed again and again and again. And yet, blue still keeps being the favorite color of the seasoned player who craftily thinks of a way to win because blue speaks to the gamer mentality. We want to outthink our opponents. Otherwise, we'd be, playing football or something. Blue wins because people love to screw with the rules and turn them to their favor, and that's something that no nerf can ever take away. And that's an end to blue. We'll come back and revisit it in the wrap-up episode, though. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for supporting me for my 25th episode. I know we'll make it to another 25 and beyond and keep getting better and better. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And please leave a comment letting me know what it is that you liked or what you think was missing. And go and check out my older videos if you haven't already, as I've covered a pretty sizable chunk of Magic's history, although there's still lots of ground to cover. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games and good luck.